Good day, people. This is your boy John Man, aka the Nappy Headed Assassin, aka the Catman, aka I am Manny's son, and this is the weekly edition of the Catman Picketh Week 3 picks. Before we get into the Week 3 picks, I want to talk about last week. And last week, I had a bounce back week. As y'all know, my very first week I was 6-10. The goal for the second week was to get back to 500, which was the goal, and I accomplished that. I had an 11-5 week last week, 11-5. As some of you might know, if and some of you just tuning in the very first time, I have a weekly competition with my boy Pedro Lima, aka the Rican Gorilla. And last week was our very first week as far as head-to-head picks. Also, in the head-to-head picks, we have a nickel per game, so we are wagering a nickel per game. Last week, Pedro went 12-4, and as I just previously stated, I went 11-5. So currently, Pedro is up a nickel. Pedro will not be joining us this week because he has a better life than I do. And he's doing things that he's trying to accomplish. And I am someone who doesn't have a life. So I will be doing this solo. Later on, we'll be in our first edition of John Man versus the World. I'll be doing head-to-head picks with my very best friend, Larry Rysakowicz, a.k.a. El Rusco, a.k.a. the L Train. And I'll be coming up in a little bit. But first and foremost, since Pedro is not going to be here, we're going to just quickly go through his picks for this week. And Larry and I will be going head to head after I give Pedro's picks. Pedro, for tonight's game, Miami versus Jags, Pedro picked Miami. Chicago versus Atlanta, Pedro had Atlanta. LA Rams versus the Bills, Pedro had the Rams. Cincinnati versus Philadelphia, Pedro has Philadelphia. The Washington Football Club versus Cleveland, Pedro has Cleveland. Tennessee versus Minnesota, Pedro have Pedro has Tennessee. The Raiders versus New England, Pedro has New England. San Francisco versus the Giants, Pedro has San Francisco. Houston versus Pittsburgh, Pedro has Houston. The Jets versus the Colts, Pedro has the Colts. Carolina versus the Chargers, Pedro has the Chargers. Dallas versus Seattle, Pedro has Seattle. And I'm sorry, not and, but Tampa Bay versus Denver, Pedro has Tampa Bay. Detroit versus Arizona, Pedro has Arizona. Green Bay versus the Saints, Pedro has Green Bay. And Kansas City versus the Ravens, Pedro has the Ravens with a tiebreaker score of 28-24. So those are Pedro's picks for week 3. Now, without further ado, I'll be going through my picks with my boy Larry, and I will be bringing them in a couple of seconds. Sorry about that. I have a little bit of technical difficulties real quick, but in the next couple of seconds, I should be bringing in Larry. Um, But for the time being, um, I'm semi-satisfied with my picks. The only pick that I really kind of was upset about last week that I picked Minnesota. I'm sorry, I picked Minnesota over Indianapolis. My That's the only pick that I will second guess because my inclination all along was Indianapolis winning that game, and I at the last minute had cold feet and went with Minnesota. But without further ado, I'll be bringing in my boy Larry. I can barely hear you, Larry. Hold on 1 second. Speaking in the mic, speaking to your phone mic. We're going to do it like this, people.
Put my phone down.
All right. All right. We have here with Larry. And that's Larry right there, having technical difficulties.
Yeah.
His sound is whatever. It's not your phone, it's me. But we don't have time to, do all that because we'll get it done. So what we're going to do without further ado, we're going to go through the picks for this week. All right. We're going to start off with tonight's game. Miami versus Jacksonville. I have Miami. And Larry, who do you have?
Oh, I got Jacksonville on this one.
Okay. All right. I have on Sunday, I have Chicago. It's Chicago versus Atlanta. I have Atlanta. Who do you have?
Atlanta all the way. Big time.
All right. The Rams versus the Bills. I have the Bills. Who do you have?
I'll take the Rams on that one, my man. Ram tough.
Ram tough. And Cincinnati versus Philadelphia. I have Philadelphia. Who do you have?
I'm going to go with you on the Eagles on that one, too.
Okay.
They got to win sooner or later, don't
they? They have to win sooner or later, or somebody is not going to make it off the Walt Whitman. Now, Washington Football Club versus Cleveland. I have Cleveland, and who do you have?
I'm going to take the Browns on that one, too. I'm still riding that train.
Okay. All right. And after that, Tennessee versus Minnesota. I have Minnesota.
I'm taking Tennessee as well.
Okay. And San Francisco versus the Giants. I have San Francisco.
San Francisco. I think the Giants might not win another game this whole year.
It might not win another game this whole year. That is mathematically possible.
Yeah.
Whether it's probable, it's a great chance.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Houston versus Pittsburgh. I have Pittsburgh. All right. We have the Jets versus the Colts. I have the Colts.
Yeah, the Jets might be worse than the Giants.
Yeah, I will not argue with you there. Dallas versus Seattle. I have Seattle.
Obviously, Seattle.
Okay, he said obviously Seattle, meaning that he will never pick the Cowboys ever. Yes, I am putting words into his mouth.
Yeah.
Tampa Bay versus Denver. I am picking Tampa Bay. He's rocking the old school John Lynch jersey.
Yeah.
So I would like to say, and who are you picking?
We're taking the Buccaneers. Go Bucks.
All right, go Bucks. All right. Detroit versus Arizona. I have Arizona.
Arizona, for sure.
All right. And Green Bay versus the Saints. I have Green Bay.
I'm taking the Saints. Go Martin.
Look at that. You know what I'm saying? I know his back tightened up by picking the Saints.
Kind of hurt, but
yeah, but yeah,
the Saints coming back strong.
You see the Saints coming back strong, and I kind of agree with you there, so to speak. But I just like Aaron Rodgers better than like Drew Brees. That's the only reason why I made that pick.
I'll hang out with Aaron Rodgers.
Exactly. Discount double check. All right. The Monday night game with Kansas City versus Baltimore. I have Baltimore.
Me too. Yeah, I think Baltimore. It's gonna be a good game though, man. It was a tough pick.
All right. It would be a tough pick. He has Baltimore. I have Baltimore. And for tiebreaker purposes with Mr. Lima, the Rican Gorilla, I have Baltimore winning 37-31. Pedro had Baltimore winning 28-24. Quick recap between me and Pedro. Miami Jags, both Pedro and I picked Miami. Chicago and Atlanta, both Pedro and I picked Atlanta. Rams versus the Bills. Pedro picked the Rams. I picked the Bills. Cincinnati versus Philadelphia. Both of us picked Philly. Washington versus Cleveland. Both of us picked Cleveland. Tennessee versus Minnesota. Pedro picked Tennessee. I picked Minnesota. The Raiders versus New England. Pedro and I both picked New England. San Fran versus the Giants. Both of us picked San Fran. Houston versus Pittsburgh. Pedro picked Houston. I picked Pittsburgh. The Jets versus Indianapolis. Both Pedro and I picked the Colts. Carolina versus the Chargers. I almost called them the Clippers. Carolina versus the Chargers. Both Pedro and I picked the Chargers. Dallas versus Seattle. Both Pedro and I picked Seattle. Tampa Bay versus Denver. Both Pedro and I picked Tampa Bay. Detroit versus Arizona. Both Pedro and I picked Arizona. On Sunday night game, Green Bay versus the Saints. Pedro and I both picked Green Bay. And for the Monday night game, Kansas City versus Baltimore. Pedro and I both picked Baltimore. Tiebreaker. Pedro 28-24 Baltimore, and I at 37-31 Baltimore. Hope you enjoyed. Check us all out. Check me out on my platforms, social media. That's JONMANNBABY.
John Man, baby.
And Catmann Sports, which will be coming out soon. YouTube channel and everything like that. Thank you and have a safe, wonderful day.